Hello, and welcome to this new session entitled CKA Exam VI and Linux Commands. So, as you're probably aware by now, the CKA exam, which is the Certified Kubernetes Administrator exam, it's a hands-on practical exam, which basically means that we have to become very familiar with the terminal. We will have some VI commands that we'll have to run, we'll have some Linux commands that we'll have to run, and we'll have some file modifications for YAML that we'll also have to complete during the exam. So it's critically important that we practice all of those scenarios as part of our study for and preparation for this CKA exam. So as part of that, if you go into our YouTube channel here and if you go to our GitHub repository here, in series 2, you can see there's a new README here. And as part of that README, if you go into the README, you can sort of see that I've listed out a number of Linux and VI commands that would be very helpful during the exam. Now, you do not need to know all of these commands themselves, but what I would sort of suggest is I would be using this file as a reference for when I'm completing my home study. It certainly makes sense for the exam that you will learn some of the actual commands, and I've listed some of the actual VI commands here. And as you practice, for example, on certain scenarios at home, you'll also see that you will get to learn these commands as you move through your own solutions at home, because you will be always changing a directory or making a directory or catting a file. You will always be using one of these commands in the type of scenario, because the terminal itself is very interactive and it has an awful lot of actual commands that are available. But what you should really do is try and concentrate and learn even if you learn top 10 commands that you use and that would get you through the exam quicker, because as the exam is a time-based exam, the quicker you move through the actual files and the Linux commands, the quicker you will actually complete the exam. So what I've also done here is, as part of my own practice here, is I've created a new Raspberry Pi instance here. So I have a Raspberry Pi that's connected to my home network, installed it with a Kubernetes cluster. So if you'd like to see how I did that, you can go back to series 1 here, and you can see here 1.5 is Kubernetes on Raspberry Pi. So all I did was I basically created a new instance of my Raspberry Pi and I installed it with a Kubernetes cluster, exactly the same as I did in this step and the same as I did in the actual series video. But I'm going to use this Raspberry Pi, and the reason I'm going to use it because it makes sense, so that I have a safe playground here, because I'm going to use this Raspberry Pi for certain other items going forward in my study. But as you're aware, I'm also going to take this exam. So what I'm trying to do here is make sure that I have a safe playground that I can run and practice all of these type of commands here, so I won't interfere, with a production environment or anything like that. But I do have a safe environment that I can run and practice here. And if we go back into our VI commands here, you can see, the simple things here that, I could just sort of say Control R, and you can sort of see if I sort of say kubectl, I can start getting lists of commands that I've previously run, and if I Control R again, as the notes sort of say, I can see the commands that I've previously run for kubectl. Okay, and then I can just exit out that, and I will basically sort of say, okay, clear my screen, because I'd like to sort of see less text on the screen. And again, that was just that clear here, was just my clear terminal command here, and what I'd like to do is also kind of, create a few files, making sure that I practice these types of scenarios of, moving to the end of the file, moving to the beginning of the file, and copying text out of the file, copying lines out of the file, deleting the file, deleting the current line, deleting X number of lines, and using the undo command, which is just U. So that's quite cool. So if I sort of say, vi text.yaml here, and this is obviously not going to be YAML file, but if I would kind of go down and I was saying okay, this is my YAML file, for example, and I'm going to, you can see that I'm in insert mode right now, and I can press the escape key, and I can press colon W Q exclamation mark to save that file. And now I can sort of say, okay, let me see my file here. So I've just cat my file here. And what I would do is I would use these commands here to go in and modify that file and practice on just a dummy file. You know, get really, really good at trying to memorize that you can go straight to this line and cut it. You could go straight to this line. You could go to this line um, and modify the line itself. Um, and then for the Linux shortcuts for the exams, you know, you can sort of see here, you know, I've got the basics. I basically used Linux before, really. You'd sort of see that, you know, a lot of these commands are quite useful. You know, you can kind of just do, you know, ls-l to sort of list the actual output of the files. But these would be the basic commands that you basically have to be using within the exam. Certainly these ones, you know, sudo as root here is also a good one. The uptime you probably would not need to actually know the uptime of an actual system unless something came up in the actual exam itself. But also maybe something like this, you know, um, looking at the start of a file, looking at the end of a file, they can be very, very useful from the exam because, you know, I can sort of say, you know, head test.yaml, and I can sort of see that I've got my whole file here. But if I also sort of say, and this is just because it's quite a short file, but if I sort of say, you know, just show me the first two lines here, I can sort of see the first two lines here, and that just took 1 second for me to actually type that command rather than having me, you know, go into the actual file and explore the file um, itself. So I knew the file was there because I just run my ls command. So I knew the file existed. I knew it was at this time. I knew it was a small file because if you look at the actual bytes here, and I knew that when it was actually created, this file. So it made sense that this was the file that I was looking for. You know, I've also put down here how to run jobs in the background. I've sort of said how to make curly brackets on Mac, which is quite important too. Um, I've also sort of said here's some advanced commands. You know, you're not going to need these for the exam, but it certainly just makes sense if you definitely want to learn about these type of commands. So I can sort of say here as well, man, which is to open the manual of any of my commands. Um, so I can kind of do that, and I can sort of say, okay, go press quit to quit. But I can basically look at any of my commands here using the manual command here, and this is about file permissions. Probably file permissions will not come up in the exam, but I've left it here because I think it's kind of, you know, good to start being security conscious about your files. Um, but certainly if you're working from home, you may sort of, you know, in your own lab environment, you may have some permissions that come up. So, you know, it's just important to actually know and understand. And then you've got your kind of Linux and your networking. So, you know, how to wget, like download a file, how to curl to hit a URL, how to zip up a file. You know, you can see here that, you know, you can have some examples here a little bit more complicated. Which ones you're going to learn, including netcat. You know, I would certainly learn these type of ones like wget and netcat for the exam. Looking at the curriculum for the exam, there is some networking. You know, try and practice these, like, you know, sort of see what works, what doesn't work. Try and look a bit more into, you know, how to use wget, how to use netcat, um, how to make sure that, you know, you can actually sort of see which is your IP here. There's a little bit on security, but you probably will not get anything on too much on security. But I'm going to kind of modify that if as I come through my own learning and studies. And then finally in this file here, what I've also done here is I've said, you know, this is a VI editor commands. Now, most will sort of say it's not actually required anymore. So I put a very good link in here um, from a person called Jedi that Ashcode. And he says that, these are actually part of the terminal now, for the CKA exam. So you shouldn't have to worry about these sections, kind of too much anymore. But I'd certainly just be aware of them just in case you actually do need to set them an exam. But um, he does sort of say that you don't actually need to have them anymore. So that's my kind of complete Linux and VI commands that I'm going to start going through, learning, practicing as much as possible. Again, trying to focus on the big commands that would certainly like these, that would help me in the time of the exam, making sure that I can, understand what the actual command is. And then this will all make much more sense as you come to the Kubernetes files, and you'll understand, how to navigate the files and how to move through the files a lot quicker during the exams.